Okay. Okay. I'm going to ignore the sultry voice.
Okay, but like she clearly wants to a magazine. Okay.
No, she clearly wants magazine, it's
Obvious. I'm
true.
sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm Talia and I am bringing you the takedown episode that people probably wanted the Judith Butler episode to be.
Hello, I am Emma Zakharuk, the Resident Evil G-trans lesbian, all that, etc. I have actually never heard of this book until very recently, although I've been told that it's like a staple of third-wave feminism. And I was like, huh? Okay.
Well, it's a very well-renowned book amongst a certain crowd, let's say, but we'll get into that because, like, it would be sort of false to say that, like, The Beauty Myth is not an influential feminist book, even if it speaks to a very narrow slice of women and womanhood, because that narrow slice of women and womanhood is an influential narrow slice
Mm.
after all. We are finally talking about affluent white women feminists. We're talking about the
Yay.
white feminists that white feminism was coined to disparage. Ooh. I mean, like, I've talked at length in various places about the fact that, like, oftentimes you hear the phrase white feminism, and it's from someone whose issues with the feminist part and not the white part necessarily.
Mm.
Like, usually it gets employed to shut down feminist talking points, whether or not they are white feminist talking points. But that also doesn't mean that, like, there isn't a white feminism. So
Mm.
what does white feminism to mean to you, Emma, as the white woman on this podcast?
Well, it's kind of complicated because okay, so white feminism as like a charge, a concept, an accusation is the idea that when the woman is considered as a social political subject, only
Hmm.
the realities of white women are considered. This is somewhat complicated for me. What do I think of it as a white woman? Like, right? Because
Hmm.
I'm from Ukraine, the vaunted second
Hmm.
world, and it's like, yeah, we are white. But when it comes to like one of the hallmarks of third wave white feminism, we'll get to that, I'm sure, in this book as well, is sort of
Hmm.
like, oh, it's feminism is over times. Everyone is in nuclear families governed by girl bosses or whatever. That's just not a fact of life in Eastern Europe. That's not how it works. Misogyny is much more palpable back home.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like when people talk about white feminism, it's like it's something that I feel like should apply to us, but kind of sounds very foreign because I'm coming from a place where feminism is not mainstream. So whereas
Yeah.
what is labeled white feminism is usually assumed to be like a dominant feminism, not dominance feminism, but rather
Mhm.
a culturally hegemonic feminism almost, assuming such a thing can exist. But yeah,
Yeah, it's usually positioned against intersectional feminism, the good
yes.
kind of feminism, right? And obviously, intersectional feminism, as we established all the way back in episode 1, is feminism that includes men. Yay, we solved it. But,
Yeah, don't go
well,
check.
no,
Don't go check. It's not our best episode, so don't go listen to it.
I like it, but anyway. Obviously, as someone from a third world country, I have had a very similar experience of feminism to you. Which is not to say, by the way, that, like, stratification in feminist movements isn't a thing everywhere. So I sort of, like, take issue with the term white feminism because sometimes you get, like, people lock themselves into this frame of thinking, oh, a feminism that thinks only about the most privileged women and their concerns. That's white feminism. And it's like, well, okay. So if you're in India and the dominant strain of feminism is a feminism that only cares about the most affluent, most influential women there, which is a thing that happens. Are you going to call that white feminism as well? You shouldn't. People do. I've seen people do that. I've seen people contort themselves to criticize, what should probably be better called, I don't know, classed feminism, upper class feminism, hegemonic feminism. But I've seen people contort themselves to call it white, even when the subjects clearly are not white. But or even just like trans women, disabled women, like
Yep.
stratification within feminist movements exists everywhere. This is a tendency we have to combat everywhere. But we need to be a little bit careful about our language. At the same time, this is the kind of feminism that I think can only be best described as white feminism. And in order to get into it, in order to get into the book that we're discussing today, which is Naomi Wolf's The Beauty Myth, we're going to start, as we did in our previous mainline episode, with an article. I didn't read the book this time. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't. Although, okay,
Mhm.
I will say this. I read less of The Beauty Myth than Gender Trouble, and I'll very quickly
Wow.
explain why. So yeah, I found myself after a point having to skim Naomi Wolf's more accessible prose. She has more accessible prose than Butler, and I'm not going to pretend she doesn't. But her style of argumentation cooks your brain after a point because she will hit you with fact after fact after fact, restate her point, which is a thing and is common in academic feminism and academic argumentation in general, but she does it to a point where you hit a kind of semantic saturation, but for arguments, it becomes meaningless. And then she eventually peppers this in with her own insights, which are bad and very trite and very shallow and devoid of content. So overall, the experience of reading The Beauty Myth is slowly having your brain cooked by someone who's using a lot of feminist language, but who isn't a very good feminist, which is an opinion that most of the world now shares about Naomi Wolf, but didn't for a very, very long time. I'm gonna want to talk about why that might be, but first, let's talk about Naomi Wolf and how she is regarded today. We're going to begin with an article in the New Statesman dated 7th October 2014 and written by Sarah Ditum, whose name I do not care if I'm pronouncing correctly because she is a UK feminist. That kind, yeah. Here's the headline of the article. Naomi Wolf is not a feminist who became a conspiracy theorist. She's a conspiracist who was once right. And that's
Uh-huh.
interesting.
Right.
Here's the subtitle, though. No matter how odd her pronouncements about Julian Assange or the Scottish referendum are, we must never forget that once, with the beauty myth, Woolf identified a conspiracy that is real patriarchy. And
Okay.
we don't really need to talk about the article's content itself. It's not very good either. But let's talk about that subtitle, Emma, because I get the impression you have thoughts.
Well, yeah, first of all, I have an autism actually moment, and it's like
Hmm.
the patriarchy is not a conspiracy, it's not a secret. It's not there is no
It's
cabal.
very in your face. Yeah.
There is no cabal
Patriarchy is one of the
secretly
most obvious,
conspiring.
most banal facts of life.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Uh,
Yeah. It's a lot less like narrativized. It's a lot less interesting than that, right? I will read one snippet from this article, one paragraph that I find very interesting. The sense that someone must be tugging the strings runs through the book. This is Sarah Diam talking about the beauty myth. Perhaps it's
mhm.
not that Woolf is a feminist who's degenerated into conspiracism, but instead that she's a conspiracy theorist who happened to fall into feminism first. The beauty myth is a conspiracy theory of a sort, and sometimes conspiracies are real. The self-replicating power structure of patriarchy is one of them. As Woolf spirals drastically away from the truth, we shouldn't forget that once, powerfully, she got it right. No, dumbass. Like, okay, let's try to buy into the article's thesis for a second, right? Naomi Wolf is this powerful feminist thinker who always had a bit of a conspiracy bent, and she spiraled away from the truth now. But that doesn't mean that her past work should be maligned or that we should not, or that we should discount the importance of the beauty myth. But,
Well,
like,
okay, you know what? You know what? You know what? In
mhm,
principle, the concept of that
mhm,
someone's work does eventually stand on its own, and if they, go off the deep
mhm.
end in the second half of their life and, I don't know, join a doomsday cult or something, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything they produce, that the works they produced before then are necessarily null and void and stupid. So, in the spirit of that, let's engage with Naomi Wolf's work of the beauty myth and decide whether it is
Mhm.
indicative, whether it has merit, regardless of Naomi Wolf's conspiracy streak.
Well, that's the thing, Emma. As like Sarah Ditum noted in her article, it is very hard to separate Woolf's feminism from her conspiracist thinking because
Mm.
that is sort of where her analysis comes from. We'll get to that in a second. But the more direct connection between Woolf's reputation today and how we should think of the of the beauty myth today comes from okay, so there's always been this very inconvenient fact about the beauty myth that people kind of overlooked all this time, even as early as 2004, even as early as 1994. The beauty myth came out in 1990. But Naomi Wolf gets a lot of statistics. You know how I said earlier that she just sort of throws a bunch of statistics and facts at
Mhm,
you over and over again, slowly cooking your brain and follows it up with shallow analysis? She got a
mhm,
bunch of statistics, important statistics that were core to the thesis of her book, wrong badly by a few orders of
uh-huh.
magnitude. And this is something that, like, there are recent articles talking about this, and the reason that there are recent articles talking about is because she did it again much later. Like, people will be probably more familiar with Naomi Wolf's gaffe about her new book at the time in around 2019 or so called Outrages, which was, according to Naomi Wolf, a study of the criminalization of same-sex relationships. She was on a podcast, or no, she was on a BBC radio show, and she talked about uncovering the several dozen executions of gay men, including teenagers who were accused of having sex with other men. And the host of the program told her flat out to her face that this fact, uh, you know, this thing that she was relying on for the thesis of her book that she had supposedly uncovered in the historical record was based on Wolf's misunderstanding of notation in the archive. Death recorded didn't mean that they had been killed. It indicated the opposite, that the judge had recommended a pardon from the death sentence. And look, that's confusing
Oh.
notation.
Okay, it feels mean to laugh at such a like a dire topic, but it's like, okay. So you recorded the exact inverse statistic.
Yup. These teenagers, these men who were accused of having sex with other men were being pardoned rather than put to death for having sex with men. So I haven't read that book. I don't plan to. I don't know how much the book unravels, but a very similar thing happens in the beauty myth as well. So I'm going to quote Lisa Featherstone from an article in 2021 here. Wolf's anorexia stats were wrong. The author of a paper that was published in 2004 literally coined an acronym WOLF to describe Naomi Wolf's approach. Wolf's overdue and lie factor. There was an actual paper published in 2004 dedicated to studying how wrong the anorexia stats in the beauty myth were, where Wolf placed deaths from eating disorders at 150,000 annually. The actual number at the time was closer to 50 or 60. For comparison, 150,000 was the number of coronavirus deaths in the United States that had occurred by the end of July 2020, and 38,000 is the number of car accident deaths annually in the United States. In a patriarchal society, women do tend to be overlooked, but a mass extinction event is hard to miss.
Yeah,
So,
no kidding. No kidding about like that. Oh my god.
so there's getting stats wrong, and then there's looking around you and noticing, hey, I don't think women are experiencing a mass die-off.
Okay. So oh, God. Okay. So among other things, this prompts me to suggest that Naomi Wolf doesn't understand patriarchy because women in patriarchy are a resource, a reproductive and sexual and domestic
Mhm,
resource. So the women that the patriarchy can be interested in hypothetically killing off are
mhm,
usually not women that it deems fit to reproduce the nation. That is,
mhm,
white, middle class, upper class women and girls, which
mhm,
do suffer from anorexia extensively. I do not have the stats to say if there is a difference between women of different classes, women of different races in America, etc., different ethnicities, different
mhm,
countries. I don't know these statistics. I can't. This isn't something I can intuit based on my understanding. But I
mhm.
can tell you that upper and middle class women and white women definitely did and do suffer from anorexia and other eating disorders. And I can tell you that American patriarchy doesn't want to mass kill them because it wants them to breed. That's just nonsense. To suggest that it's
Yeah.
genociding them is nonsense.
Yeah, we're gonna circle back to Naomi Wolf's bad statistics a little bit later. For now, let's front load some of the most unsavory aspects of this badly reported statistics, because there's a reason Wolf did this. Now, I'm not gonna go so far as to suggest that she made these statistics up. Like, I'm willing to bet that she just got them wrong, or reported a fact that she read somewhere and didn't sort of look into particularly closely. I believe that is actually what happened, according to a different author from the 90s. But when Naomi Wolf uncovered this, you can tell on the pages of the beauty myth that, like, she talks about this topic with a barely suppressed glee. because she cannot and will not stop comparing this to the Holocaust.
Oh my fucking god.
Wolf is definitely guilty of making a very inappropriate comparison for no good reason for what should already be a relatively sensitively handled topic. And
Yeah,
I'm going to say something that should be fairly obvious. They don't have to be dying for us to take it seriously, Naomi.
yeah.
Like eating disorders are still bad.
There is this thing that is so pervasive, not just in feminism, but in general, that there is an idea of scarcity of care
Uh-huh.
and like because every person has a degree of priority. Like I happen to care about topic A more than I do about topic B for whatever reason, because I probably have more personal experience with topic A and topic B, even though intellectually I don't think that one could take priority over the other. But like there is a lot of people in the world. I'm sure together, all together, we can care collectively about all the things that we need to care about, right? But no, there is
Uh-huh.
an idea that there is a scarcity of care, that we can only direct our efforts in one direction. And therefore, the directions that we can direct care into should be sorted by degree of need, which
Uh-huh.
creates incentive to, if I care about topic A, right? I know that other issues exist, but I need to get you to care about the same thing that I care about. Therefore, I have to prove that the thing that I care about is the most important one. They are dying right now. This is the worst thing to have ever happened. It's like, okay,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't work this way, even. But
Mhm. Yeah. To be like the barest amount of fair to Naomi Wolf, it is true that like feminism and misogyny in particular are quite prone to being, I'll generously call it deprioritized in discussions of like liberation, social justice, leftism in general, and that is an issue that we need to solve. But sort of inventing a genocide out of your ass is not the way to do it. It really isn't.
honestly,
Hooray!
it's not a very good way to achieve what you want, because it's
Nope.
like people that are anti-feminist, you tell them that like women are dying or whatever, assuming they believe you,
Uh-huh.
assuming they just 100% believe the things you're telling them. They're just gonna be like, okay, we gotta save our broodmares,
Uh-huh.
QGCs, you know. Well, not to say that Naomi Wolf literally created the GCs. That's not what I'm saying. But like the logic is not going to change just because you told them that the women are dying.
We're gonna make that comparison later on. And I
Okay.
will say something did happen. Something very directly anti-feminist did result from Naomi Wolf making up these stats or reporting these bad statistics, which
Oh
is
no.
a different author, a very influential anti-feminist author using her takedown of Naomi Wolf to legitimize her bullshit anti-feminism. But later on. For now, we can finally dive into the book itself. Let's sort of leave this most unsavory aspect of the beauty myth behind, and let's try to be as fair as we can to the thesis and topic of the beauty myth. Now, so what is the thesis of the beauty myth? What angle, what sort of revolutionary feminist analysis is Naomi Wolf bringing to the table in 1990 that has caused some Wikipedia article writers to mention the beauty myth in the same breath as gender trouble for some reason? Well, Naomi Wolf believes that we won feminism. Hooray. However,
Sorry. My apologies.
so this is very pervasive sentiment, and like it's there. It's very strong in the beginning of the book, but it's pervasive throughout the entire book. And like it circles back to who Naomi Wolf expects the audience, the reader of her book, to be. Like I'm sure all sorts of women have read the Beauty Myth, but Naomi Wolf was talking about professional class affluent white women and was expecting mostly professional class affluent white women to read her book. And the 90s were an interesting time in feminism for such women, the unfortunately most influential voices in feminism, where they sort of found themselves a bit adrift. Plenty of them had made a lot of professional gains. There were workplace protections, period, for them. They were able to earn independent incomes. It was kind of a new dawn for a certain class of women. And we've talked about how sort of like, social movements in the West, their rhetoric, their influence, it does spread across the world. And like, in general, I'm not gonna pretend that like things haven't been getting better for women over the past few decades. But like at the same time, Wolf says things like, "Oh, women used to be valued for reproduction,"
Used
and
to
you
be.
keep having Yeah, used to be. Yeah. And you keep having to be like, that still happens, Naomi. I'll say this. It still happens even for affluent, white, professional class women.
Yep.
Like, this is the problem with white feminism, or like even with critiques of white feminism, right? There's always a kind of dumbass white woman who will be like, I have it great, therefore feminism over. And there are plenty of writers, plenty of feminist writers in the 90s whose attitude towards feminism was basically that. It was very end of history, end of feminist history. It was very oddly Fukuyama pilled. Or not oddly, I think, appropriately Fukuyama pilled, I suppose. And then you kind of have to remind them, okay, that but it's not over though. Like, maybe even for like
It's
a different affluent white woman, she might be having those problems that you think none of us are struggling with anymore.
Yeah, it's God. You know what? It's not even true for the West. It's never been true. It's never been true at all. It's like it's the ye olde the well, women are not a minority, but like the discriminated demographic has a slightly better. This is the end of the world, but like the end of the world positively in
Mhm.
this case.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that like you and I are kind of like eliding, or the sort of like magic trick we have to play sometimes, right? Oh, patriarchy is so much more palpable in the second world than the third world. And it is, but it's not like it's not palpable in the West. I've been there, I've
Mm.
lived there. It's pretty fucking palpable. And it's not even just palpable for racialized women or queer women or working class women. It's palpable to a certain degree for all women. And like, through the power of race and class, some women are able to insulate themselves from the worst effects of patriarchy. But here's secret. That's true everywhere.
Yep.
And so Naomi Wolf writes sentence like, oh, women used to be valued for their reproduction, or like, oh, women used to care a lot about their chastity. And it's like, I think honestly, those standards of evaluating women's worth still apply even to the girl boss CEOs, and you kind of have to keep that in mind. You kind of have to game that system still.
They absolutely do. It's like, they haven't stopped about talking about like you were like used gum if you're a girl and have sex or whatever in the United States, or about body counts and stuff like that. Like, what do you think that is? What do you think that is? Just because it's not like enshrined into literal law doesn't mean that it's gone.
Yeah, and like as much as like millennial sex positivity has, I think, had a market improvement in women's attitudes and cultural attitudes towards sex, especially women who have sex, it really hasn't gone away. It's going to take a lot for that to go away. So this begs the question, like, okay, why is Naomi Wolf sort of all in on this narrative, right? Okay, leaving stupidity aside, leaving bad feminist analysis aside, why does Naomi Wolf phrase things in this way? Because it's not like Naomi Wolf isn't aware of racialized women or lower class women. And that's the sort of most awkward bit about the book. Like, very early in the book, Naomi Wolf talks about, like, the third world, talks about working class women and things like that. But she sort of dismisses it as, she sort of talks about how, the professional white working class woman of today is able to sort of outsource domestic labor, reproductive labor, watching your kids and stuff to lower class women. And then she moves the fuck on and never brings it up ever again. And that already tells you something, doesn't it?
It's giving okay. It's giving Janice Raymond. Okay, I'm sorry. This just reminded me of the bit where Janice Raymond was like, "Oh yeah, this trans woman told me that they make you say, that she has to pretend to be a ultra feminine, conservative trad wife in order to get her hormones. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The trans are all regressive, and that's just it. She just doesn't pay attention to it because it doesn't fit into her narrative. And this is like, I'm a bit joking. I don't think Naomi Wolf is literally like Janice Raymond, but it's the same approach. It's like I have. Oh, okay.
Emma,
Okay.
you have
Okay.
you have no idea. We'll get
Okay.
there. Continue.
Okay, but my point was that she has already decided on a narrative, and so when she encounters evidence that it might not be correct or she might need to change something, she just like, huh, and fully cogdices it. Just ostrich directly into the sand, doesn't matter, moving on.
It's really weird because it's so blatant. Like, okay, she does talk about women of color. She talks about, okay, there's a small chance that the parts I'm remembering right now that I'm about to talk about are purely from the intro that she wrote to the 10-year anniversary edition. I think it does come up later when she talks about beauty magazines and stuff. But like when she talks about like racialized women, it's mostly in the context of, oh, we need more diverse bodies in our beauty magazines and in the fashion industry. And it's just, we need more women of color. And it's just like is that the most pressing issue facing us now? Do you think that's our biggest
Yeah,
problem right
sure. Why not?
now?
Yeah, sure. That's the most.
Yeah, cause like she says it. She says it. She says like, you know, most women are able to like, hire nannies and whatnot, and so
What
feminism
the
is
fuck
over
are
there.
you
It's like, what
talking
about the
about?
nannies, Naomi? What about the nannies, Naomi?
Is that even true? I feel like that's not true. Anyway,
I think it's true in Naomi's specific class and or circle of peers. That's the
okay.
most generous I can be. It is very clear at various points in this book that Naomi is really talking about her own experiences and generalizing them. And someone really should have told Naomi Wolf, instead of calling the beauty myth a fucking modern classic, someone should have told Naomi Wolf, what the fuck? Because like she's okay. Why is she doing this? It's because she's trying to create a grand narrative, and because she wants to be an important feminist, and that is, I think, let's contextualize that. And Naomi Wolf very heavily, very clearly, very blatantly keeps circling back to Betty Friedan's feminist mystique, and the reason she
Mm.
does that is because she places her own new theory, supposedly new theory, that she coins the beauty myth as an aspect of women's oppression in the modern day that is as powerful, as restrictive as the feminine mystique used to be.
What?
In a sense, Naomi Wolf wants to be the Betty Friedan of a new generation, which is a thing that is complicated by the fact that we didn't fucking win feminism.
Okay, I have a question, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding
Yes.
terminology that the beauty myth refers to something other. Did women's beauty not exist before women won feminism? Th- like when author whatever the fuck in the year 1600 was writing about honeyed lips and pale skin or whatever of his like
Mhm.
crush, wasn't women's beauty. That was something else.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because Wolf will happily and merrily go over the historical archive and tell you and talk about, women who faced harassment and discrimination in the workplace, specifically on the basis of their looks, and then totally ignore the fact that she is talking about the pre-feminism one era, the era of Betty Friedan, the era of the second wave when all this happened. Because, as Sarah Ditton said in that 2014 article, fucking decade and a half too late. No, 2 decades and a half too late. Good lord. Naomi Wolf is very, very conspiracist. The way she talks about patriarchy is in a very sort of like anthropomorphized way. She's like, there is a group, there is someone out there creating beauty standards, creating the beauty myth, pushing it onto us as a way to oppress us now. Now that women have won all of these rights through feminism to be like autonomous and independent, ignore the fact that that's not true of all women, because she really, really wants this beauty myth to be like the model for patriarchy and feminism.
Okay,
And I mean, where do I
o-
begin?
okay. Can I make a hypothesis?
Go ahead.
So you know this kind of thing where people who are like one characteristic removed from like the most powerful demographic of people they could be, right? They have this
Mm-hmm.
degree of resentment. It's like if it wasn't for this one thing, I could just be a person. I could just have it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like this sort of like feminism is over is I could see someone like that, like a woman like that, looking at that and being like, but why is my life still not great? Why is there still patriarchy in my life? It must be a
Mhm.
conspiracy.
Yeah. And like in that sense, I will agree with Sarah Ditum on this one thing. Naomi Wolf is very much a conspiracist first and foremost. That much is quite evident. It is very evident even as you read this, one of her earliest and clearly the best renowned of her work. But she was never right.
No, no, that sounds pretty kooky to be honest.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. So that begs the question, who is behind the beauty myth? By the way, I have a short note on like the beauty myth and like some other terms. Like, okay, there are phrases that three-word phrases specifically, the first word is always the, that like Naomi Wolf tries to coin throughout the book, and it's very clear that she's trying to make them like kind of staples of feminist analysis. There's the beauty myth, of course. There's also
Mm.
the Iron Maiden, which is what she calls sort of like the effects of beauty standards on women. It's basically the same thing, but it's just like, oh, beauty standards are what make women want to sort of like, be smaller and sort of like constrain us like an Iron Maiden, like the medieval torture device you see.
Mhm.
I'm doing so heck of feminist analysis right now. And then at one point she talks about the surgical age, all caps for these, or first letter capitalized rather, camel case, I believe. And it's just like, that's not how, as a feminist writer, this hurts me. And it's just like, okay, sometimes you kind of have to like, you're torn between trying to describe something in an accessible manner and describing something in an accurate manner. And sometimes that makes you have to use words like epistemic and apologize for it. Where it's like, this is the entire other end of that. Like, okay, the surgical age, the beauty myth, the Iron Maiden. These are all like, these are simple words. These are concepts that people would understand, but they don't actually have a lot of like analytical power
Explanatory
behind them,
power.
especially.
Mm.
Yeah, analytical or explanatory power behind them, especially when the phenomenon you are describing is so removed from the structural aspects of how patriarchy actually works. It is so bad feminism from top to bottom. But okay, who is responsible for perpetuating the beauty myth? Who is behind big beauty? Emma, do you have a guess?
uh, Prada, Balenciaga, Victoria's Secret. I don't fucking know. Sorry, what's her name? Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada.
I mean, so that would be a logical conclusion, right? Okay, if you really want to stake your entire feminist claim on the idea that beauty standards, the beauty myth, fine, let's use Naomi's language.
Mm.
If you really want to stake your entire claim on the idea that the beauty myth is the source of all suffering, and there is someone singularly responsible for it, you would have to look towards the fashion industry. And Naomi Wolf does, and then she absolves them.
But what's
Okay.
the point of the conspiracy if I can't like be like they're behind this?
Well, you
Like,
see, the thing
there's no fun
is,
in it.
Emma, you don't understand. Miranda Priestley herself is really awesome and cool and like an older mentor who I really, really badly want to fuck. And yes, she is putting anti-feminist, she is putting patriarchal beauty standards in her magazine, but she is being forced to do that by big advertising. It's
O-
not her fault.
Okay,
Miranda Priestley is gonna be my friend.
okay. I
It's
mean,
exactly that weird.
listen. I can't say I'm not currently writing um a very The Devil Wears Prada inspired thing that is borderline like the closest I will ever write to just erotica.
How do you feel about the fact that you have the same kinks as Naomi Wolf, Emma?
I don't have the same kinks as Naomi Wolf. You take that back.
Okay, can I read a rather long snippet from the book right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, my Naomi Wolf voice. The magazine's message about the myth is determined by its advertisers. But the relationship between the reader and her magazine doesn't happen in a context that encourages her to analyze how the message is affected by the advertiser's needs. It is emotional, confiding, defensive, and unequal. The link binding readers to their magazine, the great umbilical, as some call it, the trust. The myth isolates women by generation, and the magazines seem to offer them the wise advice, tested by experience, of an admirable older female relative. There are few other places where a modern woman can find such a role model. She is taught to dismiss her own mother's teachings about beauty, adornment, and seduction. Since her mother has failed, she is aging. If she is lucky enough to have a mentor, it will be in a professional relationship in which these intimate skills are not part of the training. The voice of the magazine gives women an invisible female authority figure to admire and obey, parallel to the mentor protege relationship that many men are encouraged to forge in their educations and on the job, but which women are rarely offered anywhere else but in their glossy magazines. The voice encourages that trust. It has evolved a tone of allegiance to the reader, of being on your side with superior know how and resources, like a woman run social service. Many cosmetic companies are on hand to help. We know how to make a difference. Let our beauty specialists guide you step by step. The magazines provide actual services, listing helplines, offering readers polls, giving women tools for budgeting and financial information. These combine to make the magazine seem to be more than a magazine. They make it appear to be a mix of extended family, benefit agency, and political party, and guild. They make it look like an interest group with the reader's best interest at heart. A magazine, says one editor, is like a club. Its function is to provide readers with a comfortable sense of community and pride in their identity.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to ignore the sultry voice. I'm going to ignore the.
Okay, but like she clearly wants to fuck the magazine. Okay.
No, she clearly wants to fuck the
It's
magazine. It's
obvious. I'm
true.
sorry.
It's true. But okay, it's like. It's just. You know how sometimes, in order to have your king fantasy, you have to concede to some nonsense. Like to things that logically make no
Mhm.
goddamn sense. So, like, women have lost their older mentors and now magazines are substituting them. Like, no, that's not true. Like, women are encouraged not to listen to their mothers, so they must turn to the magazines. That's not fucking true. I read the same stupid magazines that my mom read, and I read them because my mom had them, and she was like, look at this cool thing in my magazine, and I was like, oh, that is cool. Like,
Okay, I'm gonna say something cutting. Later
uh,
on in the anorexia chapter, annoyingly, she like relates an anecdote about how like younger women are all clearly starving themselves, but it's gauche to comment on it, and she talks about and then she describes having lunch with a younger woman, where the younger woman is like clearly just like ignoring her and like more focused on the food, and it's just like or like focused on like avoiding the food. It's like a very sort of like emotionally charged description. But also, it's a little bit like Naomi. I don't think I would blame any younger women for not wanting your sage advice. Like, I think it's possible that they have clocked you.
it's like, no, let's. It's just it's so bad as theory. It's like it's taking like a kernel of something that's maybe like the thing of like, oh, advertising informs beauty magazines. Like, yeah, that's correct. Like that people do see things that are written in the magazines with a degree of authority or verisimilitude. That's kind of correct, and it's just like runs with them into unseen and uncharted territory that make no goddamn sense.
Yep. He does this a lot, even with like various anti-capitalist insights on occasion, right? You know, like over here. So instead of like blaming women's magazines, she's like, okay, I will blame the market, the faceless market that is, this big eldritch entity, or like I'll say the advertisers are responsible for like pushing anti-feminist stuff, even when the magazine really wants to be feminist, and then doesn't really take that any further. Like, we'll talk about her conclusion later, or maybe we won't because it's a very thin conclusion. But like in her conclusion of the book, Naomi Wolf is just like, we need to unionize and this and that, and it's just like, okay, but like you didn't write a particularly socialist feminist book here, babe. Especially when you were like, fuck the poor is in the beginning. So I don't know exactly don't know exactly what you're playing at. Okay, so actually before we move on to the cosmetic surgery chapter, I want to drop this little snippet. I selected it out from the entire book just for you, Emma.
Okay.
Can I read it to you now? No
Yep.
sultry voice, I promise.
Okay. Oh no. Okay.
All right. With Glasnost, the beauty myth is being imported
For
behind
fuck's
the Iron
sake.
Curtain as much
For
to
fuck's
illustrate
sake.
a possible revival of feminism as to simulate consumer plenty where little exists. Glasnost and Perestroika, says Natalia Zacharova, a Soviet social critic, seems likely to bring Soviet women contradictory freedoms. Glamour will be one of them. Her remark was prescient. Reform, Hungary's revealingly named first tabloid, read by 1 in 10 Hungarians, has a topless or bottomless model on each page. Playboy hailed Soviet Natalia Negoda as the Soviets' first sex star. Nationalist China entered the Miss Universe contest in 1988, the year the first Miss Moscow competition was held, following Cuba and Bulgaria. In 1990, outdated copies of Playboy and women's glamour magazines began to be shipped to the Soviet bloc. We will be able to watch the beauty myth unfold there, in utero. Tatiana Mamanova, a Soviet feminist, responding to a question about the difference between the West and Russia, replied, the pornography, ... It's everywhere, even on billboards, ... It is a different kind of assault, and it doesn't feel like freedom to me. So,
Okay.
thoughts?
So, Okay. So what you have to understand about the kind of people that would be published widely in like magazines and whatnot is that they would be saying things that are complementary to the ruling party in the Soviet Union.
Mhm.
You couldn't publish something that was very critical of it. Just do it. Like you can publish it as like sort of indie kind of deal, but you couldn't just
Mhm.
like you could not be a Soviet feminist. Like that could not be your job if you were doing that kind of stuff. And the other thing is that's one thing. Second of all, there was austerity in the Soviet Union, meaning you couldn't just buy whatever clothes you wanted to, or like you know the amount of clothes offered and their variety. Visual appeal and comfort tended to be lacking, but also at the same time, people did
Mhm.
like learn how to make their own clothes and modify them and stuff like that. Like beauty was always a thing to the point. Like, have you ever seen social realism statues? Have you ever seen how ripped
Mhm.
and beboobed those women are? What do you think that is? What do you think? What do you
Yeah.
think that is?
It's just this like incredibly like single-minded and focused need that she has to have the beauty myth be a recent invention installed by, I guess, free market capitalism, which Naomi Wolf apparently hates despite, being fucking like that. It leads her to some very absurd conclusions, and one of them is definitely ignoring the fact that like beauty has always been an aspect of patriarchy, of women's oppression, of gender in general throughout all of fucking history. Like, there's some like discussion of like pornography over here alongside anorexia for some reason. Very strange choice. And like, you could maybe unearth a salient point or two from that if you tried really hard, but why would you bother? Because she just doesn't know how to talk about any of this stuff. Like, you could say something about the proliferation of these images, whether in pornography or in mainstream advertising. You could say something about, sex becoming a more banal and everyday part of our lives, and whether that's good or bad, or like, how that is affecting culture and like our perception of sexuality. And you will find like zero discussion of that in this book. Certainly not anything coherent. Okay, so back to the sultry voice. Well, okay, so
Oh no.
remember the part where Naomi Wolf wants to fuck the magazine?
Uh huh.
Please do not let Wolf's remarkably, like, should I call it edible or Electra? Do we have a special word for when a woman wants to fuck her bomb? I don't think Freud bothered coming up with one because, he was a
No.
twat.
Uh,
But like, like
milfitude. I don't know.
sure, why not? We'll go with that. So like, Wolf's own like displaced psychosexual feelings for her mentors or mentees aside, don't let any of that trick you into thinking that Naomi Wolf is not deeply, deeply heterosexual. And hey, okay, this is the part where we get to actually talk about Judith Butler. Cause like, okay, you know how we talked about the central thesis of Gender Trouble is about attacking the natural and also about attacking the heterosexual matriarchal maternal default in feminism, how feminism
Uh,
keeps, when unchecked, keeps turning into the feminism of the affluent, the feminism of the privileged, and under patriarchy inevitably evolves into the feminism of mothers rather than the feminism of the misogynized. Naomi Wolf is exactly that feminist. Naomi Wolf believes somewhat unironically that heterosexual love between men and women is being suppressed under patriarchy. I'm going to
what are you
repeat
talking
that.
about?
Heterosexual love between men and women is being suppressed under patriarchy.
Okay, can we put Naomi Wolf in the same room with people that are like romantic love is a psyop to unqueer us or whatever? Just put them in a room and have them fight it out and never hear either of those arguments again.
There are various snippets I'm going to read out, but I'll start with this one because it sets the conspiratorial tone again. Because like I will say that like if you have one takeaway about this book or like one big critique of Naomi Wolf's feminism is that she cannot stop making analyses that are conspiratorial in tone. She has a very like I like for all her ironic denouncement of individualism in the conclusion of her book, she has a very individualist mindset. She keeps thinking, oh, somebody must be responsible for this rather than thinking in terms of culture and institutions. And when it comes to heterosexual love, here's what she has to say. Heterosexual love before the women's movement was undermined by women's economic dependence on men. Love freely given between equals is the child of the women's movement and a very recent historical possibility, and as such, very fragile. It is also the enemy of some of the most powerful interests of this society. I have a note here, and the note just says lesbian feminism envy, TBH.
Gosh, you know what? I can hallucinate a half-coherent argument out of this that she probably isn't
Mm-hmm.
making. It's that, if heterosexual men were to actually love women as
Mm-hmm.
equals, that would necessarily entail that they
Mm-hmm.
would have to recruit themselves into the feminist struggle, because if you love something as a human being, as an equal, you would not wish to see that thing hurt, right? You would not consider
Mm-hmm.
yourself above those people, right? But I feel like that doesn't really reckon with the reality of like the fucking world. I don't know. If the world actually fucking worked like that, then the first time, I don't know, a white person fell in love with a person of color, racism would be over, and it doesn't fucking work like that. Nah,
Okay.
I'm sorry, it just
I have,
doesn't.
I have, I have so many excerpts from this section, too many, so I'm going to have to summarize after a point, but here's one that I have to read out in its totality. Okay?
Mhm.
So, once again, keep that conspiratorial bent of all of this in the back of your mind. And, sorry, I'm doing the sultry voice for
Okay.
heterosexuality. It's okay, you'll live. If women and men in great numbers were to form bonds that were equal, nonviolent, and sexual, honoring the female principle no less or more than the male, the result would be more radical than the establishment's worst nightmares of homosexual conversions. Pause.
What?
Lesbian feminist envy! A mass heterosexual deviation into tenderness and mutual respect would mean real trouble for the status quo, since heterosexuals are the most powerful sexual majority. The power structure would face a massive shift of allegiances. From each relationship might emerge a doubled commitment to transform society into one based publicly on what have traditionally been women's values, demonstrating all too well the appeal for both sexes of a world rescued from male dominance. The good news would get out on the street. Free women have more fun. Worse, so do free men.
Okay. It's like
This is very funny to read in a post-sex positivity world, let's say.
it is very funny to read. And it's also like, okay, can I draw a different example? Like, most
Mhm.
parents love their children. I don't think that that needs to be contested very much. Not all parents, but a lot of parents love their children in some capacity. Does that fucking stop the treatment of children as property? Many of those parents treat their children like property. You can love your property. It's fine.
Yeah, and it's like, okay. So the free love thing was also something that they tried back in the 60s around the whole feminist mystique second wave era that like Naomi is so enamored with and wants to be a continuation of. And like, one of the first chapters of Right Wing Women is Dworkin talking about how that went nowhere. Like we keep doing this on a cycle. And then like in 2019, okay, I have another note here, which is Asa Sarason called. We should tell him we've been doing this shit since the beginning of the third wave and it hasn't worked yet. Which, I'm wrong here. We've been doing it since the beginning of the second. Asa Sarason is, of course, for people who might not know his name off the top of their head, is the author of the On Heteropessimism essay that everyone is so
Uh-huh.
obsessed with these days. Oh, we shouldn't be heteropessimist. Why are women heteropessimist? Why do women think that relationships with men are unsatisfying? Why are women embarrassed of talking about their relationships with men? And and then you look around and, all that sex positivity and stuff has led to good outcomes for women and has also led to record resentment among men. It has led inexorably, directly, into a reactionary backlash of rather terrifying proportions. And I don't know, we need to sit these gals down and we need to tell them, we need to explain to them that, yeah, free love would be neat, but like the patriarchal model of love and sex and ownership benefits men a lot. and they get real antsy when you try to take it away from them.
It's also like status quo has a degree of inertia. And like the problem with hierarchy is that in order to like yes, it's true that in a
Hmm.
imagined egalitarian world, we can make everyone reasonably happy. Like not as in inject them with euphoria chemicals or something like that, but everyone would
Hmm.
have a chance at happiness that is worthwhile and fulfilling and equal. But that does require a like devolution of material circumstance for people that are the ruling class, as it were, within this specific hegemony. Like in a
Hmm.
prospective, gender-free feminist future, men would no longer be entitled for their bitch wife to do all the cleaning of the house. Like it just not, they would just
Yep.
wouldn't be. And obviously,
Hmm.
we can say that like in the present reality, that's not the reality for a lot of people. That's not tenable. That's not livable. That doesn't fucking work like that. And that's true, but that doesn't stop men from crashing out about how their mommy wife will not do all the cleaning for them because they feel
Hmm.
entitled to that. And they're like, well, if she just fucking did that, everything would be fucking aces. In order to get to the post-gender utopia, you kind of are asking them to give up that idea.
Hmm. And so that's the interesting thing, right? So Naomi
Mm.
Wolf calls it heterosexual love, but she really is describing, like, she's describing the post-gender utopia. She's describing lesbian feminist futurism. She is describing love between equals. Okay, I think I find that, like, I wrote lesbian feminism envy as a joke, but like this is literally what it is. That part where she's like, oh, if heterosexuals could just, we could free love our way to a better society, much better than any homosexual conversion. Like, she's talking about like, I assume she's referring to like homophobic propaganda rather than like the idea that lesbians want to convert straight women or whatever. But like, there is like a lesbian feminist in the back of in the back of Naomi Wolf's mind who she's terrified of. You can call this the freeing of heterosexual love if you really like Naomi, but what you're talking about is a transformation of heterosexuality, of heterosexual relations under patriarchy, into something that simply no longer resembles heterosexuality. You are talking about the end of heterosexuality, just trying to soften the blow by using prettier words, by being like, oh, we'll still be men and women under this paradigm, even though what you are advocating for is quite directly the end of men and women as social constructs, as sex roles, as like positionality in society. And it just frustrates me so much because it's just like, we're so close. Like, again, Butler's Attack on the Natural in Gender Trouble was addressing exactly this kind of feminism, this sort of like psychosexual anxiety that heterosexual feminists have, being like, oh, but if our men only just loved as equals, if our men only just loved us as equals, but still stayed men. And or like, oh, patriarchy is suppressing natural female sexuality. If women are dependent on men, we can't be as sexual. If women can't choose, we can't be as sexual. And it's true that patriarchy regulates women's sexuality, but like to sort of quote unquote set women's sexuality free, or to which usually in this formulation takes the form of like women being able to enjoy sex more and engage in more sex on their terms, that doesn't end patriarchy, because once again, the patriarchy has always had a role, a place for the public woman, the loose woman, the sex worker, the woman who men use to indulge their carnal desires but cannot, or like, who is considered too low status to treat as a privatized broodmare to reproduce with, or to reproduce the interests of the nation with. So you kind of have to be cognizant of that. And it's just so frustrating to see, because like, okay, the fan fiction is fan fiction at this point. Like, well, I mean, I guess it's just fiction, romantasy, but like, okay, sorry, I literally can't read this part without laughing at this. She's like, and Naomi Wolf literally says in this book that like heterosexual love would end imperialism.
What?
You
What are you
see, the
talking?
military is supported by nearly one-third of the United States government's budgets, but if under free heterosexual love, men would recommit themselves to the family, they would become lovers and not fighters. They would no longer believe the propaganda of militarism. Men would see each other as lovers and fathers first and men of different nations later, and peace on earth. This is the most like, I'm sorry, this
I'm
is the
not
most
even going to
hippy dippy
comment on
shit
this.
I've ever read.
I'm not even going to
This is
comment
like
on it.
this is
This is
like
deeply stupid.
60. This is like all the way throwback to 60s free love bullshit. This is just like I don't know. I think we gotta like this is feminism's a big elephant in the room, right? The whole like, yeah, you need to transform sexual relations under patriarchy in order to end patriarchy. That is like arguably that is what the end of patriarchy means, the end of the regulation of sex. But oh boy, our is Naomi Wolf's and our imagination and the imaginations of feminists like her. They're so constrained.
I'm not. I'm tired of pointing out how the things she's saying are literally not true. Like, do you know how many men are like, I am a father, like that doesn't stop them at all. Whatever,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. The fucking the way they motivate people to be like, you have to defend the nation is like, look at your wife and children, or people that could be your
Mm-hmm.
wife and children. Isn't it bad if they
Yep.
died? Like, oh my god, fuck it, yeah.
Literally, men's commitment to the family is a big driving force of fascism and nationalism. Like, okay, Naomi Wolf is bad at feminism, bad at statistics. She's also just bad at political science in general. She doesn't understand feminism. She doesn't understand patriarchy. She doesn't understand nationalism. She doesn't understand reactionary thought at all. So how the hell is she like, okay, I actually have an answer to the why was Naomi Wolf taken seriously question that I said at the beginning. She's white. It's just that she's white. To be honest, there is no other reason. It's that she's white. She presumably had connections and affluence because she sure talks like she does. And like, despite the fact that she clearly has no idea what she's talking about, despite the fact that this feminism barely passes muster, if you take like the slightest passing glance at it, the beauty myth is a cornerstone, a foundational text of the third wave. Why do none of y'all read the fucking books? Why have I been able to cultivate an entire brand out of reading the fucking book and then holding it up and being like, ain't this bullshit? Good lord. Do you feel a bit brain cooked, Emma, just from the snippets I'm reading out to you?
Is the entire book like this? I assume that the answer is yes.
The entire book is like this. Imagine just all of the snippets, even in just the heterosexuality section that I didn't read to you right now. Imagine how cooked your brain would be. Imagine if I read the parts where Naomi Wolf waxes poetic about Germaine Greer, because of course this entire
No.
shtick is very female eunuch inspired. Yeah, this is where I started skimming. Do you think I was going to subject myself to this forever? Again, she just keeps throwing, and need I remind you, wrong statistics at you and bad analysis. Like her entire point in the anorexia chapter. So she puts it next to pornography, and she's like, "Oh, this is the pornographic age and the anorexic age. Women are starving themselves to fit a particular beauty, the Iron Maiden, and we're getting all unrealistic." Sadomasochism and dominance-based sexuality, where we had free heterosexual love between equals. Like it's the same thing, just with like bad statistics and many comparisons to the Holocaust, and we've already gone over why that's incredibly annoying. No, we're actually going to move on to a fun topic, Emma. Do you want to move on to a fun topic?
Sure.
Okay, we're going to move on to the fun chapter, the cosmetic surgery chapter that is titled Violence for some reason. And we're going to talk about how
Uh,
Naomi Wolf invented AGP from first principles. So, Emma, what is autogynephilia? Can you give our listeners a quick rundown?
okay. So autogynephilia is, so there's this quack called Blanchard that wanted to sort trans women into the ones he would fuck and the ones that he wouldn't. And he split trans women into two groups: the homosexual, transsexual. Homosexual in this case means attracted to men, and
Mhm.
the autogynephile. And basically, the theory is that there are two kinds of quote unquote men that wish to become women. And the homosexual transsexual is one that
Mhm.
is so gay that he becomes a woman. And the autogynephile, conversely, is attracted to women and sort of it's a fetish of seeing himself as a woman that is so overwhelming that it becomes a desire to become a woman. That's a summary, my summary anyway, of the theory of the homosexual, transsexual, and the autogynephile. It's quack
Is it
bullshit.
obvious?
It's
Mhm.
quack bullshit. It's complete nonsense. Things that are like things that prove that autogynephiles are real are things like, I feel sexy when I put on a sexy dress, which is, totally not the point of sexy dresses. To it's complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense.
Can you tell that Ray Blanchard is a gay man because he can't even conceptualize being attracted to women? Because he's like, well, yeah,
Oh
there's
yeah,
there's
he
two
is
kinds of
right.
trainees.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's two kinds of trainees: the ones that are attracted to men, and the ones who are attracted to the idea of themselves as women. And it's like, motherfucker. Actually, some of us find women hot. What are you talking about? It's a so AFL. It's very funny how the first time AGP and HSTS come up is in the Beauty Myth episode, but there's a reason for that. And, we're not going to linger too much on Blanchard right now. Julia Serrano's talked about him. I've talked about him in an essay at the end of Brown Trans Les. It's just, debunking the guy is easy, and the only reason he's taken seriously is because he sort of gives a scientific veneer to this like cultural idea of a trans woman that already exists, right? Most people conceptualize trans women as like gay guys who are
Yeah,
so gay they want to be women. Like
yeah.
that's just a common cultural trope that like Ray Blanchard spackled some pseudoscientific bullshit on. But why am I talking about this in the context of the beauty myths, and specifically, why am I saying that Naomi Wolf invented AGP from first principles? So let me answer that question with another snippet. Are you ready for another snippet, Emma?
Oh boy, sure. Let's say that I am.
This outside in perspective on their own sexuality leads to the confusion that is at the heart of the myth, the beauty myth. Women come to confuse sexual looking with being looked at sexually. Many confuse feeling
What?
with being sexually felt. Many confuse desiring with being desirable. My first sexual memory, a woman tells me, was when I first shaved my legs, and when I ran my hand down the smooth skin. I felt how it would feel to someone else's hand. Women say that when they lose weight, they feel sexier, but the nerve endings in the clitoris and nipples don't multiply with weight loss. Women tell me they're jealous of the men who get so much pleasure out of the female body that they imagine being inside the male body that is inside their own, so they can vicariously explain desire. Cis women are EGP.
I mean, cis women have always been AGP because AGP is like I have sexual thoughts about myself, which is like okay, yeah, no shit.
So, okay. So we're gonna have to talk about a little bit. Okay, so I have this very like interesting relationship to AGP because again, like I find this stuff in feminist writing all the time by cis women talking about cis women, usually cis het women, about how like desire and for women, desire is desirability. Women aren't allowed to be sexual in the same way men are allowed to be sexual under patriarchy. So the only way that they can be sexual is by like imagining themselves as the passive object that someone with agency desires. And if you look at these writings and if you look at autogynephilia, this thing that trans women are pathologized with, you will see that they line up perfectly. So what the autogynephilia diagnosis really is, it's like I have a male person here who has a women's sexuality. And it's like, no shit, Sherlock, because trans women grow up in the same society that cis women do. And we also learn that to have a sexuality as a woman is to be desirable rather than to have desire. And it's amazing that Naomi fucking Wolf in 1990 and the Beauty Myth was the one to she just says it. She just spells it out. And it's wacky. So remember when you compared Naomi Wolf to Janice Raymond completely unprompted earlier in the episode,
Yeah,
Emma?
yeah.
When she talks about cosmetic surgery, the cosmetic surgery chapter of the Beauty Myth sounds like something out of the transsexual empire. I'm talking about the exact same language. She really says that like by doing cosmetic surgery, women go from being women-made women to man-made women. It's like it's so uncanny. I have to be like, Niobe, were you
God.
referencing Janice
Well,
Raymond?
what if
Were you
okay?
literally?
What if the plastic surgeon is a woman? I'm having like cosmetic surgery in July, and my surgeon is a woman. What then?
Well, the thing is, actually, when we say man-made woman, we're not talking about the gender of the surgeon. We're talking about the fact that you are literally remaking your body to conform to male beauty standards. Therefore, even if your surgeon is a woman, you're like that's literally the logic. I'm sorry.
Sweet
Like, okay,
Jesus.
I have a bunch of zinkers for this, and I just have like, okay, so Naomi Wolf invents HEP from first principles. The beauty myth is transsexual empire for cis women. It's just amazing. It's great. I don't know what to say. I truly don't know what to say. She uses the word mutilation. Okay, you can have criticisms of the cosmetic surgery industry. You can talk about the differences between cosmetic surgery and gender affirming care, which like people make those comparisons a lot, and it's a bad comparison to make because gender affirming care, quote unquote, is like trans people literally changing sex. Is we're literally affirming a sex we're not supposed to, whereas cosmetic surgery, but that both men and women partake in, obviously.
Yeah.
Whereas cosmetic surgery is usually quote unquote affirming a gender that you are supposed to, so it has sort of like more, it's more acceptable under patriarchy, even though it's like unacceptable. Like cosmetic surgery and gender affirming care are both unacceptable in similar ways because of the naturalistic fallacy. You are considered unnatural, mutilated, man-made. You can make some interesting points there. Naomi makes zero of them. Obviously, as you have come to expect by now. This was the point in the book where, like, my brain was like, well and truly, it's like, okay, it's done. I am like, at this point, I am reading perhaps a paragraph per page. If that, it's just, oh my God. And that was the beauty myth. That was literally the beauty myth.
Okay.
I told you
Is
everything about
is
it.
that
That was,
truly it? Is the con
yeah.
is the contribution to the feminist canon is the beauty industry is bad, but not only bad, it's a conspiracy to kill women and mutilate them. Is that it?
Yes, yes, but fashion magazines aren't at fault, it's the advertisers. And also,
Right.
we need lesbian love between heterosexuals, but in a heterosexual way. And also, all cishet women are AGP.
Do you think that Naomi Wolf would be the world's most rancid trans widow if such a circumstance occurred in her life?
Like 100 and I'm not sure actually. Wait, hold on. I gotta reel that back. Interesting factoid about Naomi Wolf. She was very supportive of trans
Mhm.
women, of like trans people up until 2020. Like, okay, you know how like ROGD conspiracies and all that exist? Like the gender
Mhm.
critical movement is very conspiracy brained. Well, in 2020, Naomi Wolf decried the moral panic against trans people. And I was very disappointed because, like, Naomi Wolf was well into her crank era at this point, and I was like,
Mhm.
if she is supportive of trans people, that's bad for us. Fortunately, she's become more transphobic since then.
You're so fucking funny.
Thank you. But yeah, this is the one of the foundational fucking, I don't know, the cusp of the third wave. I guess the cusp of the third wave is like, cishet women, what you really need to do is become transgender lesbians. Like trans women who are lesbians specifically, because you're AGP. And we need lesbian love to free society. And in that sense, I guess Naomi Wolf and I don't disagree very much. So this is a great book. Fucking 5 stars out of 5. I'm just saying, if you hit your head with a hammer and then read this book with a very particular lens and ignore all the bad parts, it has a kind of lesbian feminist message. Sort of, not really.
Takes
Okay.
rip of the bong, the lesbian feminism of Naomi Wolf.
All right. We're going to talk about post feminism now.
Okay.
All right. The term post feminism was coined in a New York Times article by Susan Bolotin. The article specifically is called Voices from the Post Feminist Generation. And even though it was written in 1982, it's a very Naomi Wolf esque kind of article. I'll summarize it for y'all. We're not doing any more reading snippets. Bolotin basically, I believe she goes to her hometown and sort of talks to women of the new generation. She talks to younger women who are in college, women who are freshly out of college and in work, and she notices all these women aren't as feminist as me and my peers used to be. They think feminism is gauche. They think feminism is passe. They think if you call yourself a feminist, people will think you're a lesbian with hairy legs and men won't want to sleep with you. Oh no. And it's a bit of a. It shouldn't really have been a meaningful article, I don't think, because it becomes very clear that much like Naomi Wolf, Susan Bolotin is talking about her own circle. She's talking about a very narrow slice of women. Like some of the women she's talking to are just straight up conservatives. It's like you asked conservatives what they thought about feminism, Susan. Why did you expect a different answer just because they're women? But she coins this catchy, snippy term, post-feminism, voices of the post-feminist generation. And it's like, well, yeah, if you're a conservative, affluent, white, well, professional class woman, maybe, who works but still wants to marry a man and pop out babies, maybe feminism isn't doing a lot for you. Shocking insight. I don't know if like post-feminism really is like a coherent academic discipline as such, but if it is, the other work that is usually cited as being very influential is Christina Hoff Sommers' book published in 1994 called Who Stole Feminism? And that is a more conspiratorial title than The Beauty Myth, but a significantly less conspiratorial book. I've talked about her on a different podcast, but Christina Hoff Sommers is a quote unquote, she calls herself a feminist, but she's clearly like a right wing troll and always has been. She's this like philosophy professor who wrote this book in 1994 about how feminism is so much more queer and racialized and diverse and disabled and Jewish now. And people want like
Oh God.
accommodations at feminist conferences. And oh my God, feminisms are so cringe. Back in my day, feminists used to have dignity, and we weren't advocating for throwing out the entire male intellectual canon because we knew what was good for us. And, it's a whole bunch of horse shit, but Hoff Summers is sort of like able to start out this book sounding kind of reasonable, sort of Trojan horse it a little bit to build a case for herself as a reasonable, serious person, largely by debunking a lot of misinformation in feminist texts, such as Naomi Wolf's anorexia stats in The Beauty Myth. But I'm not
Yeah, it's just this is the
I'm
problem.
not weaving. Yeah, go ahead.
This is the problem when you
Hmm.
do some really hacky things for what you
Hmm.
think is a good cause. Like this is like half of the foundation, I guess, behind the essays I wrote about detransition. When you say things like there is only so many detransitioners, who cares about them? You think you're doing a good
Hmm.
thing, but what you're actually doing is opening yourself up to a rebuttal that did not need to exist, were you not to
Yup.
create this rhetorical gap. And the same thing is like when you're doing these hack numbers to create a conspiracy about how women are being genocided, that creates an opportunity that did not previously exist for someone to be like, feminists are making shit up and their cause doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna weave a grand narrative over here that it's Naomi Wolf's fault that we have anti-feminism. Although you can weave a conspiratorial tale, or at least a sort of more individualist tale if you're so inclined, because this book that I mentioned, Who Stole Feminism by Christina Hoff Sommers, it would go on to influence various Catholic folks, including a dude who went on to become the Pope, into talking about gender ideology, which is what they called Judith Butler's feminism before gender ideology got the connotations it today, as like the greatest threat to Christianity and complementarianism and sex itself. And in that sense, called shot, yeah, transfeminism is the greatest threat to all of those things. But I mean, if Christina Hoff Sommers hadn't written that book, or if Naomi Wolf hadn't written some bullshit to be debunked, other specifics would have filled that gap. The inexorable tide of patriarchy and reaction and Catholicism would have marched ever onto just with onward with different particulars. That's not my point here. My point is more about if you focus in on Susan Bolotin, Naomi Wolf, and Christina Hoff Sommers, these three women who are very clearly in some kind of conversation, or at the very least have similar approaches to feminism. You see that feminism fails when those women, those most affluent, most privileged women, those women who benefit the most from feminism, decide, you know what, that's not feminism for today. I got mine. And that may also be a sort of obvious statement. The greatest enemy of feminism is conservatism, whether within or without. Shocker, insight. But and I'm gonna say this very, very sincerely. We use this word very sarcastically because it's been misused so much. I'm gonna say this very sincerely. This is why we need intersectionality. This is why we need a certain type of woman to pull her head out of her ass and actually do a little empiricism, do a little materialism, do a little lesbian and trans feminism, even. Do a little feminism beyond your own immediate interests in front of your face. Because if you don't, you will end up like the wrong Naomi.
I cannot believe that this was published. I cannot well, okay, I
It
can't believe
wasn't
it.
just
I
published.
tell a lie. I can't believe that this was taken seriously.
Yeah.
I can believe this was published. I can't believe this was taken seriously.
Yep. And I think it just goes to show why we need such a critical evaluation of the third wave, right? Why we're even doing this season, why that is the point of our season, because there's so much bullshit that has just been allowed to fester unexamined. Well, we're gonna keep examining the bullshit, y'all. Catch you next time.
Bye. Cracked Ivory is supported by Patreon. Join us at patreon.com/crackedivorypod to receive early access to our episodes, as well as full Patreon exclusive episodes and behind-the-scenes content. Follow Talia Bad at taliabad.com and Emma Zaharuk at dolphindiaries.card.co for their solo feminist projects. Cracked Ivory is edited by Emma Zaharuk and produced by Talia Bad and Emma Zaharuk. All music is by Kevin MacLeod. Special thanks to White Mirror, Lava Monster, Aksan.dev, Ceiling Fan, Yana Dunfield, Candy Barber, Nix Taylor, and Meryl Geens. Thanks for listening.